breaking news. Or really just news, but you know, because we haven't really had any news, I guess. Breaking news. I, of course, am your host. Anyways, and Stan 𝒮𝔴𝔞𝔤𝔤𝔢𝔯𝔮𝔲𝔞𝔡, my trusted confidant. In any case, guys, huge news. Shade changes, Sister of the Thorn changes. Let's get to it. So guys, as you may or may not know, on the 9th of March, that is yesterday, as of this recording, a dev blog was released about the upcoming Shade and Sister of the Thorn changes. Now, most likely these changes are going to be part of the patch that they're going to reveal more about tomorrow, I believe, on the 11th of March, and I believe the patch was going to hit on the 15th of March. So, but let's take a little bit of a look here. Let's do a little bit of a breakdown, talent by talent. But first, let's take a look here. So, Kerillian's career has undergone a bit of a renovation. The changes to Sister of the Thorn will add tools and opportunities for Kerillian to become an asset to the team in more ways than previously through debuffing enemies and controlling the flow of combat. The goal with changing Sister of the Thorn is to address the most problematic areas of the career, making it into a stronger thematic role in combat, and lean more into the fantasy of Sisters of the Thorn. And then we have, of course, all of the perks, which we will go into in detail. But let's take a little look here at what they say about the Shade changes. We felt Shade wasn't in a good place as a niche melee career, and that she needed more emphasis on positioning, as well as allowing her to get behind enemies more often as a core part of her career. This is what we've been saying for quite some time, so I agree with that statement. In order to support different playstyles, we also wanted to create a clearer intention with her career skill talent. We wanted to remove the need for certain talent combinations and free up some more choices as a result. We added 2 new perks to get her more in line with other careers. We have made an effort to make sure Shade's stealth minigame is a bigger part of the second-to-second gameplay. That's good. Players who utilize this well should notice a big improvement to backstabbing. Okay. So far so good. So, let's take a look talent by hopping in-game. So let's start out with her perk changes. Perk 1, Black Venom Blades. Melee attacks apply Black Venom, dealing damage and increasing damage taken by 12% for 10 seconds. I would assume that is instead of a murder of spites. Kerillian deals up to 50% more damage to wounded targets, depending on their remaining health. So now instead of that, essentially you will be applying Black Venom, right? So that means all melee attacks are going to apply Black Venom, and Black Venom is a debuff that deals some amount of damage, which is unspecified, and increases the damage taken for that minion by 12% for 10 seconds. Okay, she will still have her other perks as far as I can tell here. Now let's take a look at her talents. Now there are going to be changes to her level 10 talents. Surge of Malice stays exactly where it is. Authority's Delight, talent 2-2, changed to applying bleed when striking poisoned enemies instead of critical strike. So the question is here, poisoned enemies, that could mean a couple of things, right? So I would assume that Black Venom Blades, which applies Black Venom, that counts as a poisoned enemy. I don't know, however, if things like, let's say, the Hackbane Shortbow, if that would also count as a poisoned enemy. That would potentially create a really interesting dynamic where you could use the Hackbane Shortbow, which is not really seeing much use due to the obvious Moonfire Bow at the moment, and possibly create a situation where you could actually use that to guarantee critical hits, which sounds pretty OP, but considering how OP the Sister of the Thorn already is, I don't necessarily think this is going to be a problem considering other nerfs, which we will get to momentarily. Then we have the 2.3. 𝒮𝔴𝔞𝔤𝔢𝔯𝔮𝔲𝔞𝔮𝔢𝔮𝔮𝔬𝑟's Bounty will be replaced with Briar's Malice. Now, 𝒮𝔴𝔞𝔤𝔢𝔯𝔮𝔮𝔬𝔞𝔤𝔤𝔢𝔮𝔬𝔮𝔬𝑟's Bounty is the go-to talent here. It is insane, right? It's essentially just a permanent 15% raw power buff. But now that's going to be changed into casting Thornwake grants Kerillian 2 critical strikes. Thornwake being her ultimate ability. In other words, you can give yourself guaranteed critical hits by doing that. So if I understand these talents correctly, this talent is pretty much irrelevant. Now just to compare, consider this, right? Here you're going to get 2 critical hits guaranteed every time you cast your own ultimate ability. Whereas currently you have a talent that gives you 3 guaranteed critical strikes each time anyone casts any ultimate, right? So it's essentially a worse version of this talent here, which to be fair was way too broken in Chaos Wastes. So I do understand that, yeah, this talent, which is also not going to work this way anymore, needed some changes. Then we have her level 20 talent, and here we have another 2 changes. Now, Incandescence stays right where it is, so you can stack Radiance twice, essentially giving you a total of 3 ultimate abilities you can cast, sort of in sequence, but they're changing Hecate's Cruel Bargain into a talent known as Bonded Spirit. Now, Bonded Spirit will reduce the cooldown of Radiance by 50%, okay, so that it's this cooldown here, which is 60 seconds, unlike her other cooldown, which is 40 seconds, right, but her Radiance cooldown up here is 60 seconds, so by reducing that cooldown by 50%, that's going to set that to 30 seconds, as well as taking damage will reduce the cooldown of Radiance by 2 seconds, right? So it's already a mechanic built into the game that whenever you take damage, depending on what class you're playing, your career ability cooldown will be reduced. In other words, you'll gain career ability through taking damage, but here that's then going to be increased by also applying to a cluster of Radiance, but to a quite significant degree, whereas normally it's based off of how much damage did you take, and that's then going to be sort of transferred into the amount of seconds you're going to refresh your cooldown with. But here we're talking 2 seconds whenever you take damage of any kind, right? So that could be quite significant actually if you think about it. Imagine a situation, I don't know if this is going to work on friendly fire or not, but otherwise I could see situations where you'd punch a fire barrel. Because a fire barrel, you know, that's going to deal a little bit of damage over time, right? Or maybe you're going to stand on the dot of a gas rat or a flame rat, or sort of the dot left on the ground from either a troll or a stormfleet, because 2 seconds per tick is quite a significant amount. When you reduce the cooldown to 30 seconds, suddenly that's like 1 in 15, right? That means 15 damage ticks would reduce the entire cooldown of Radiance. So that's quite a significant amount. Then we have another change to Radiant Inheritance. Now, Radiant Inheritance was the single most broken talent in the game when it was when Sister of the Thorn was released. Then they did a quite significant nerf to the talent, and even after that nerf, still one of the best talents in the game, right? We all know it. This is an insanely strong talent. And it has been changed now so that whenever you consume Radiance, you grant Kerillian and nearby allies 15% power, so equivalent to Isha's bounty, and 5% critical hit chance for 10 seconds. So quite the nerf, at least to Kerillian specifically. Of course, this is going to have more of a sort of team utility function, so that Sister of the Thorn can't farm all the green circles necessarily. So it's also going to apply to your team, which of course makes her more of a team-oriented class, as opposed to a Shade, which is more of a, you know. Moving on to her level 25 talent, we have a change to the Pale Queen's choosing. Now, this has been replaced with a talent called Recursive Toxin. Black Venom can now stack twice. Now, remember, Black Venom was this debuff that you're going to apply automatically through a passive perk, which essentially deals damage and causes the target to take 12% more damage. So stacking that twice, you're going to be able to cause a target to take 24% more damage this way, and possibly also stacking the damage. But we don't know how much the damage is, so that's of course hard to say. Then we have 5-2 here, Morai Hex Doomside. Now this has been changed with a talent known as Lingering Black Venom. Critical strikes apply Black Venom to enemies near the target. Now I could see an interesting combination possibly. Like when I read this talent, I'm thinking it sounds pretty underwhelming, honestly. But maybe there's a world where when you combo this with the other talent, which essentially caused poisoned enemies to also be critical hits, right? So if you think about it, if poisoned enemies are guaranteed critical hits, right? And then you also have that critical strikes apply Black Venom to enemies near the target. Well, that means you could create a feedback loop, right? Where you causing a critical hit is going to apply Black Venom to a target and to the targets around it, thus giving you guaranteed critical hits to all of those targets, thus applying Black Venom to all the targets around them, thus giving you guaranteed critical hits. You see what I mean? So I'm thinking about that's going to be a very interesting combo dynamic, which to be fair also sounds extremely broken in the context of Chaos Wastes. But of course, we'll have to wait and see. It's always hard to say. This is pure speculation. I haven't tried any of these talents out yet, so just want to say that. But I could see a very interesting dynamic there, especially if Hackbane Shortbow does actually count as a poison. Now, then we have the ultimate ability talent, the career ability talents. Now, there's a change to all three of them, starting out with Ironbark Thicket. Now, Ironbark Thicket is now also going to increase the width of the wall. Now, I could imagine that essentially turns it, like, this is just a guess, again, haven't seen anything, but my guess would be that it's probably going to be like twice as wide, something along those lines, right? So that you would have something that looked like that, essentially, making it easier to sort of, block off passages, as well as keeping the increased 10-second duration. Then we have our dear Bloodrazor Thicket. Guys, they've taken away our dear circular burst damage AoE, which, to be fair, was broken as hell. That I think we can all agree this ability right here is very, very broken, very insane. And so they've released a little bit of a video that I'm going to play for you guys here, where you guys can see what the new talent does. But let me read it aloud. Thorny vines now erupt from Kerillian and travel towards the target area. Enemies hit are dragged towards the target area. So it seems to be a wall that sort of drags minions between you and the wall to the other side of the wall, right? Essentially also giving it a feature of being able to push minions off ledges. Does this work for bosses? The short answer would be I don't know, but I would assume that it does. Simply on the basis of this ulti here also being able to push bosses. So I would assume that the wall would also be able to drag bosses. That would at least make sense to me. But who knows? Who knows? Again, this is not something I know, just me speculating. Now, lastly, we have the changes to Black Venom Thicket. Thornwake instead causes roots to burst from the ground, staggering enemies and applying Black Venom to them. So, causes roots to burst from the ground. Makes it sound possibly what they have done here, okay? What I'm hoping, I'm not sure about this, right? But I'm thinking that very much sounds like Bloodrazor Thicket, right? It's going to be called Black Venom Thicket, but it sounds like Bloodrazor Thicket. So I'm thinking, really, they have removed this talent here and instead replaced it with this talent right here. That's my hope, because it sounds that way, right? Thornwake instead causes roots to burst from the ground, staggering enemies, that's what it does, but now also applying Black Venom. So those are essentially the changes to Sister of the Thorn, and honestly, assuming that most of the things we have assumed here are true, I think that's actually going to be quite a refreshing change to Sister of the Thorn. Going to make her probably slightly less OP in terms of pure solo power capacity, where she was already way too broken, let's be honest, giving her a bit more of a team vibe, which I think is a good thing overall. I think she's still gonna be really, really strong. Like, it's still gonna be one of the strongest heroes in the game, so I by no means think this is gonna be like a terrible, insane, like, destruction of the class by any stretch of the imagination. And so, yeah, only time will tell whether it's gonna feel balanced in the game. That's obviously too early to say. But I'm honestly excited for these changes. I can see some really interesting gameplay, particularly with that wall that drags stuff behind it. That's gonna be a lot of fun to see. And so with that said, let's move on to Shade. Shade is pretty much being reworked from the ground up. So let's try and take a look. First of all, there are 4 changes just to her passive perks. Okay, starting out with the first, Murderous Prowess. Critical hit backstabs instantly slay man-sized enemies. Man-sized enemies being anything smaller than a Chaos Warrior and a banner 𝒮𝔮𝔲𝔞𝔤𝔤𝔢𝔯𝒮𝔮𝔲𝔞𝔄𝔄 Specifically the one that spawns banners, right? So this would be a sort of example here, a Storm Vermin of a man-sized enemy. So if I were to critical hit him from behind, he's going to get executed, killing him instantly, regardless of my actual armor damage, right? So if I just attack here a few times, boom, that was a critical hit, he is now dead, right? And it doesn't matter how much HP he has. I could set this on Kata, wait for a critical hit, boom, and he instantly dies. Now the change here is that now it's going to be charged critical backstabs instantly slay man-sized enemies. In other words, this is now only going to work if it's not only a critical hit, but also a heavy attack, right? So I would have to do like that, right? So it has to be a heavy attack now in order for that mechanic to take place. Then we have another 3 changes, starting out with Assassin's Blade here. And now Assassin's Blade is essentially a 50% increase to your damage when you're punching something from behind. In other words, if I were to equip some daggers here, or a sword and dagger, and spawn this same enemy here, right? Now this attack would deal less damage than this attack, right? In other words, this attack here would deal 50% more damage than this attack right here, right? That's now being changed to 100%. In other words, now you essentially deal double damage from behind. On top of having this mechanic where you can execute it, you're essentially now just dealing double damage from behind by default. Then we have Blur. This is a completely new passive, 2 completely new passives actually, Blur and Dagger in the Dark. Now Blur says that parrying an attack and quickly dodging grants Kerillian stealth for a short duration. Now that would look something like this, right? So you have a Storm Vermin here, you parry, that is essentially a timed block, right? So that's just so you can see, till the last second here, boom, and then you're gonna have a parry, boom, right? It's about timing it properly, right? So now what this is saying is that I would have to parry the attack and then dodge. Now I would be invisible for a short duration. Now what is a short duration? My guess is that it's either 2 or 3 seconds. Yeah, 2 or 3 seconds, that's my guess, okay? You could say that if you look at Handmaiden's talent, it also says a short duration, I believe, and that's for 2 seconds. So my guess is it's in that range, right? So essentially you'd have to parry this attack, perform a dodge, now you're invisible, now you could move behind him and sort of, yeah, do a heavy attack to execute him. Because the third perk, Dagger in the Dark, melee attacks from stealth are always critical. So essentially what this would allow you to do is go invisible, and now you're behind him, now you can execute it, right? So you need to perform your parry, do a dodge to activate it. Now I don't know how long are you gonna have after you perform the parry to actually dodge to go invisible. I don't know. Hopefully there's gonna be an associated temporary buff with it, so that you know, okay, how long do I have to dodge? And that's of course going to have its own passive, showing that you're in this, and any situation where you are invisible is now going to be a guaranteed critical hit, allowing you to then go behind the enemy minion, perform a heavy attack, which would then execute said minion. Okay, so these are the passive perks. Let's move on to the talent changes, of which there are exactly 4. First, we got Exquisite Huntress. Headshots increase headshot damage bonus by 10% for 5 seconds, stacks up to 10 times. This is a pretty basic change, essentially buffing the talent by increasing the headshot damage buff to 10 seconds from 5 seconds, making it a lot easier to stack this buff, right? And this essentially allows you to get 100% headshot damage. So imagine if you can headshot something from a backstab position, like if you're behind a Chaos Warrior, okay? Just see here, Chaos Warrior, Chaos Warrior, here we go. Imagine that you're behind this Chaos Warrior, right? And you manage to, right? Then you're essentially gonna deal 300% damage. I don't know if these 2 buffs are gonna stack multiplicatively or additively. That's too early to say. I would think additively, but stacking multiplicatively with raw power buffs. But we'll see. That's too early to say. But then you're essentially dealing 300% damage. So, interesting. Very interesting. Then we have a change to her level 20 talent, Vanish. Now, Vanish is going to be replaced, because obviously this would be way too OP. Like, when you're going to have, like, guaranteed critical hits from Vanish. If Vanish was still a thing, you'd just be able to, you know, go behind a Stormweapon Patrol and just heavy attack it to death, essentially guaranteeing every single new stealth. So that would be slightly too OP, right? So essentially it's being swapped for a talent called Focused Slaying. Killing an enemy with a backstab grants a cooldown reduction for 3 seconds. So essentially any backstab killing is going to reduce your ultimate's career ability by 3 seconds. Now Shade has a 1 minute cooldown on her ultimate ability by default. Now, Shade has one of, if not the strongest career ability in the entire game, right? If you just look at the raw power of the ultimate itself, it is probably the single most OP ability in the game, providing, you know, both utility, survivability, insane single target damage. It's an insane ultimate ability, right? And 3 seconds, that's not trivial, okay? You can see here, even if I spam here, it goes down, right? So 3 seconds, that is a significant amount, okay? That's a significant amount. That's essentially 5%. 5, 10, 15, 20, right? Cooldown reduction on top of the cooldown reduction you already get for punching stuff. So this is quite significant, and it's going to make it really interesting to see how this dynamic... The only thing I dislike so far really is the parrying thing. But I do understand why they've... I think I understand, I should add, why they've made it that way. So what I like about it is this whole new dynamic of stealth, executions, cooldown reductions. So I definitely think they understood what we wanted and are pushing towards the right thing. I'm also a bit nervous, I gotta add, about the parrying aspect. I'm not entirely sure if I like the concept of timing a block to go in this, because it's one of those awkward things, I feel like having to, oh, punch me, right? I feel like it's gonna feel very artificial from time to time, if that makes sense, to be like, oh, Stormwomen, guys, please don't kill the Stormwomen, guys, don't kill the Stormwomen. Okay, heavy attacking, parry, dodge, yeah, invisible, right? So I'm a bit scared that that's gonna be very awkward in practice. Too early to say. Not saying that it is, too early to say. But I do understand why, right? Because if it's too easy to get to stealth, then Shade is gonna be grossly overpowered, right? Like, just think about it. If it's on your terms to go stealth in that manner, then it's gonna be very hard to balance if you want to keep the core mechanics of executions and such. So I'm gonna give them I'm gonna give the benefit of the doubt here and see. We'll see when we play it, right? How it feels, how it's gonna be in sort of in the gameplay. But I'm optimistic, despite that reservation. I am optimistic. Then we have 2 changes to her career ability talents. So Cloak of Pain is gonna stay the same. Hitting an enemy while under stealth, infantry does not break stealth, blah blah blah. Second attack does not grant bonus damage, but it's now still gonna be a guaranteed critical hit because you're still gonna be stealth. So essentially, Cloak of Pain is reverted to how it used to work, right? With the one caveat being that you're gonna need to heavy attack to execute on the second stealth. But then we have changes to Cloak of Mist, which is now being replaced with Shimmering Strike. Leaving Infiltrate grants Kerillian stealth for 3 seconds. Killing an elite or special enemy extends this effect by 1 second. So leaving Infiltrate, right? In other words, you're gonna ulti, just like with Cloak of Pain. You're gonna ulti, boom. Okay, now you've left in this, right? But leaving that Infiltrate is gonna give you stealth for 3 seconds, equivalent to Vanish, right? So you have a Vanish of time to now kill an elite or special enemy to extend this effect by 1 second. So I'm trying to think here, right? Because now you're gonna be in this, right? Which means you're gonna have the guaranteed critical hit, which means which means you should be able, hold on, Storm Vermin. Means if you had a very nice alignment of Storm Vermins, right? Then let's see, if we have 3 seconds, let's wait here until 3, 2, so that'll be 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, right? So it's gonna give you the ability to extend your stealth for a while at least, right? For a while. But what I'm actually curious about is this stealth effect, right? This stealth effect that's implied here, killing an elite or enemy special, enemy extends the effect by 1 second. What I'm curious about, really curious about, is whether or not that would apply to her other stealth. The one where, okay, parry, boom, dodge, and you have a short period of stealth, right? And it would all kind of match up if that stealth period was also 3 seconds, and if this effect also applied to that stealth. Now, if that is the case, then I think we have a winner talent here. Like, at the very least, for sort of the very meticulous Shade players, I feel like that's going to be a very interesting mechanic if that's the case, to see how far people can take these stealth iterations, because then there's really an incentive to get that sort of stealth combination going. So that's going to be interesting to see. And then lastly, but not leastly, or maybe actually probably leastly, if I'm being honest, we have changes here to Shadow Step. It's going to be replaced with Hungry Wind. Leaving Infiltrate grants Kerillian 10% movement speed and 15% power, with the ability to pass through enemies for 10 seconds. Infiltrate no longer grants bonus damage. Yeah, that's an irrelevant talent. Completely irrelevant. I'm sorry to say. I feel like I'm not entirely sure why they would remove the bonus damage here. I've 10% movement speed, 15% power, ability to pass through enemies for 10 seconds. I feel like even if you were to grant this talent the same damage that you have from Cloak of Pain or the upcoming Focus Slaying, I still don't think I would pick it. I still think that either of these two talents, maybe not this one, it would be maybe a slightly stronger Cloak of Pain, also depending on whether or not the power applied to the actual damage talent itself. Moving through minions, don't get me wrong, that's very, very strong, so it would be a very strong solo talent. But I don't know, I feel like by saying that you no longer grant this damage, I feel like that essentially makes the talent irrelevant. So I feel like something would have to change for that talent, in my opinion. Again, I haven't played with it, haven't tried it, so I'm not going to say that this is the end and all, right? We'll see when we try it out. But just on sort of my first impressions, I would say that talent sounds too irrelevant, slightly too irrelevant, and would, in my opinion, need some sort of buff to be justified. Maybe a cooldown reduction. Nah, not a cooldown. Nah, I don't know. I'm actually not sure. I would have to think a little bit more about that. But yeah. So all in all, I think Shade is gonna be in an interesting place afterwards. So I actually really like these Shade changes, if I'm being perfectly honest. No more Cloak of Mist. I've hated Cloak of Mist since the talent came out. It was so OP in the beginning, and the way it works now is just not enjoyable, right? Because it doesn't, again, allow you to play with this invisibility mechanic of like executions, invisibility, critical hits, executions, right? So it's going to be very interesting to see where it goes from here. Yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say about that today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe for more Vermintide videos. Obviously, we'll be doing more videos, possibly some streaming, as soon as the update hits. There's going to be more news tomorrow, I believe, Friday, possibly today, depending on how quick I am at editing this video, because by now it's almost 9 o'clock. So yeah, more stuff to come. And as always, I love you guys. Stay awesome. Peace out.